I let her say this was her house with her rules. Then I used property ownership, a broken TV, and consequences to end the marriage forever story. Quiet evening routine. Instead, I was greeted by the sight of my 65-inch television lying face down on the hardwood floor. The screen completely shattered. Glass fragments sparkled across the living room like expensive confetti. My stepson was standing in the corner with two of his friends, all of them holding gaming controllers and looking like they'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. The kid was 16, old enough to know better, old enough to take responsibility for his actions. "What happened here?" I asked, keeping my voice level as I surveyed the damage. Before he could answer, my wife came charging out of the kitchen like she was ready for battle. "It was an accident," she announced, crossing her arms defensively. The boys were playing and the controller slipped out of his hand. I looked at the television, then at the distance between the couch and where it had been mounted on the wall. The physics didn't add up. A controller slip caused a mounted television to fall. "Yes, that's exactly what happened," she said, her tone getting sharper. "And before you start with your lectures, I want to make something very clear." Her son shifted uncomfortably, but she was just getting started. She stepped closer to me, her voice rising. "This is my house. These are my rules. And these are my kids. You don't get to interrogate them like they're criminals." I felt something cold settle in my chest. My house. My rules. "That's right," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I've been living here for 3 years now, and I'm not about to let you turn this place into some kind of military boot camp just because a little accident happened." The two friends were now staring at the floor, clearly wishing they could disappear. My stepson was looking everywhere except at me. But my wife, she was doubling down. "Kids break things," she continued. "That's what kids do. And if you can't handle that basic fact about family life, then maybe you need to adjust your expectations. Or find somewhere else more suited to your controlling personality." I looked around the room slowly. The house I bought 5 years ago, the mortgage I'd been paying alone for 2 years before she moved in, the insurance, the taxes, the utilities, all in my name, all paid from my account. "So let me make sure I understand," I said quietly. "This is your house with your rules for your kids, and I should just accept whatever happens and keep quiet about it." "Finally, you're getting it," she said with satisfaction. "I'm glad we could clear that up." Her son mumbled something about being sorry, but she immediately cut him off. "You don't need to apologize for an accident. These things happen." I nodded slowly, pulling out my phone to take pictures of the broken television from several angles. "You're absolutely right about one thing," I said, my voice calm and measured. "Rules are very important in a house." She looked pleased, thinking she'd won. "I'm glad you finally understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I replied, already planning my next move. "In fact, I think it's time we both got very clear about exactly whose rules apply in whose house." The satisfaction on her face flickered slightly, but she held her ground. "Good. I'm happy we finally agree on something." I smiled, but it wasn't warm. "We do agree. Property ownership comes with certain rights and responsibilities." I couldn't agree more. As I headed upstairs to my office, I could hear her telling the boys that everything was fine now, that they could order pizza and not worry about the television. She sounded so confident, so certain that she'd established her dominance. She had no idea what she just set in motion, but she was about to learn that when you declare war on someone in their own house, you better make sure you're actually standing on solid ground. I had some documents to review. I closed my office door and pulled out the filing cabinet where I kept all the important house documents, property deed, mortgage papers, insurance policies, utility accounts, everything spread out across my desk like evidence in a courtroom. The deed was crystal clear, purchased in my name only 2 years before I even met her. The mortgage, same story. Every single bill, every tax payment, every insurance premium, all traced back to one name, and it wasn't hers. I photographed each document with my phone, creating a digital backup of what I already knew. She could claim ownership all she wanted, but legal reality had a way of cutting through emotional declarations. Downstairs, I could hear her ordering pizza for the boys, her voice cheerful and victorious. She was telling them not to worry about the television, that accidents happen in every family, no mention of replacement costs, no discussion of consequences. 20 minutes later, she knocked on my office door. "Dinner's here," she announced like nothing had happened. I joined them at the dining room table, watching as she served pizza to her son and his friends like she was hosting a celebration. The broken television was already forgotten, apparently. "So," she said, settling into her chair with obvious satisfaction, I'm glad we got that whole situation sorted out earlier. It's important that we're all on the same page about how this household works." Her son was staring at his pizza, still uncomfortable. The friends were eating in silence, but she was riding high on what she thought was her victory. "I know it might take some adjustment," she continued, looking directly at me. "But every blended family goes through these growing pains. The important thing is establishing clear boundaries about parental authority." I took a bite of pizza and nodded. "Boundaries are definitely important." "Exactly," she said, warming to her theme. "I can't have you undermining my parenting decisions or making my kids feel unwelcome in their own home. They need to feel secure here." "Their own home," I repeated thoughtfully. "That's right. This is their home now, just as much as it's ours. And home should be a place where kids can be kids without walking on eggshells every time something gets broken." One of the friends glanced up at her, then at me, clearly sensing the undercurrent of tension despite her cheerful tone. "I mean, let's be realistic," she continued. "A television can be replaced, but if a child grows up feeling like they can't make mistakes, like they were constantly being judged and criticized, that does permanent damage." I set down my pizza slice and looked at her steadily. "So, your position is that there should be no consequences when valuable property gets destroyed." "My position," she said firmly, "is that natural childhood accidents shouldn't be treated like criminal acts, and I won't have my children made to feel guilty for being children." "Natural childhood accidents," I said. "Is that what we're calling it?" Her jaw tightened. "Yes, that's exactly what we're calling it, because that's what it was." I glanced at her son, who was now looking even more uncomfortable. "What do you think happened?" Before he could answer, she cut in sharply. "We already discussed what happened. The conversation is over. I was asking him." "And I'm telling you, the conversation is over," she said, her voice rising. "You don't get to interrogate my child at the dinner table." The room went completely silent. Even the friend stopped chewing. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "So, to summarize, this is your house with your rules for your kids. Expensive property can be destroyed without consequences, and I'm not allowed to ask questions about it." "Now, you're being dramatic," she said dismissively. "I never said you can't ask questions. I said you can't interrogate children like you're running some kind of police station. And if I don't like these arrangements," she shrugged, but there was steel in her voice, "then maybe you need to find a living situation that's more compatible with your expectations, because this is how families work in the real world." I nodded slowly, taking another bite of pizza. "You know what? You're absolutely right." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "Property rights are fundamental," I continued, "and you're correct that the person who owns a house gets to make the rules for that house." She looked pleased but wary. "I'm glad you're finally seeing reason." "Oh, I'm seeing everything very clearly now," I said, finishing my slice. "In fact, I think it's time we both started being very precise about exactly who owns what around here." The smile faded from her face. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up from the table. "It means tomorrow we're going to have a much more detailed conversation about property ownership and house rules. But tonight, I think I'll let you enjoy your pizza in peace." As I headed back upstairs, I could hear her trying to restart the cheerful conversation with the boys, but the confidence was gone from her voice now, replaced by something that sounded suspiciously like uncertainty. She wanted to talk about house rules and property rights. Perfect. Tomorrow she was going to get a very thorough education on both subjects. The next morning, I waited until everyone left for work and school before putting my plan into action. I had taken the day off, telling my boss I had some urgent home matters to handle. That wasn't a lie. First stop was Best Buy. I walked straight to the premium television section and picked out a 75-inch model with all the latest features. More expensive than the one that got broken, but I figured if I was making a point, it might as well be a good one. "This is a beautiful choice," the salesman said as I arranged delivery for that afternoon. "Your family's going to love this." "Oh, it's not for the family," I replied. "This one's going in my bedroom." Next, I drove to Home Depot and picked up a heavy-duty wall mount and an electronic lock system designed for securing valuable electronics, the kind they use in hotels to prevent theft. By 3 o'clock, I had everything installed. The new television was mounted securely on my bedroom wall with a digital lock that only I knew the code to. I tested the system twice to make sure it was working perfectly. Then I went downstairs and removed every trace of the old television setup from the living room. The broken pieces went in the trash. The cables got stored in the garage, and the entertainment center got pushed against the wall. The living room looked strangely empty without the focal point everyone was used to. At 4:30, my stepson came home from school first. I heard him drop his backpack by the door, then go silent. A few seconds later, he called out nervously, Where's the television?" "There isn't one," I replied from the kitchen where I was calmly making myself coffee. He appeared in the doorway looking confused. "What do you mean there isn't one?" "I mean exactly what I said. There's no television in the living room anymore. But where did it go?" I took a sip of coffee and looked at him steadily. "Well, the old one got broken yesterday, so I got rid of it." "Okay, but where's the new one?" "There is a new one," I said. "It's in my bedroom." His eyes widened. "Your bedroom? Why would you put the television in your bedroom?" "Because it's my television, and I decided I wanted it in my room." He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "But what are we supposed to watch?" I shrugged. "That's not really my problem to solve, is it?" 20 minutes later, my wife came home from work. I heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floor, then stopped abruptly. The silence stretched for a long moment before she called out sharply, "What happened to the living room?" I walked out to meet her, still holding my coffee cup. She was standing in the middle of the empty space, looking around like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "I cleaned it up," I said simply. "Cleaned it up? Where's the television? Where's all the equipment?" "The broken television is in the garbage where it belongs. The equipment is stored in the garage." Her face was getting red. "And the replacement television is in my bedroom where I can enjoy it without worrying about accidents." She stared at me for a full 10 seconds before exploding. "Are you out of your mind? You can't just move the family television to your bedroom." "Why not? It's my television. It's the family television. It belongs in the family room." I set my coffee cup down on the kitchen counter. "Actually, let me correct something there. Yesterday you made it very clear that this is your house, with your rules for your kids. So I decided to follow that logic. What are you talking about?" "Well, if this is your house with your rules, then you can handle providing entertainment for your family. I'll handle entertainment for myself." She looked like someone had slapped her. "That's not... You can't just what? Make decisions about my own property?" "I thought we established yesterday that property owners get to make the rules." "You're being ridiculous." "Am I? Yesterday, when your son broke an expensive television, you told me that accidents happened and I should just accept it. You said this was your house and I needed to adjust my expectations. So, I adjusted them." Her son had been hovering in the hallway, listening to every word. Now, he spoke up hesitantly. "Maybe I could help pay for a new television. I have some money saved for my job." "Absolutely not," his mother snapped. "You're not paying for anything. It was an accident." I looked at both of them calmly, and that's exactly why the television is in my room now. Because apparently accidents just happen, and property just gets replaced automatically, and nobody needs to take responsibility for anything. My wife's voice was getting shrill. "You're punishing a child for an accident." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply making sure my expensive electronics are in a safe place where accidents are less likely to happen." "This is insane. Families watch television together." "Then maybe the family should invest in a family television with family money that the family is responsible for protecting." She stared at me like I was a stranger. "I can't believe you're being this petty over a television." "Petty?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yesterday you told me this was your house with your rules. Today I'm following those rules. If you want family entertainment in the family room, then the family can provide it." I picked up my coffee cup and started walking toward the stairs. "My television is in my room where it's safe. Your house, your responsibility to furnish it however you see fit." As I climbed the stairs, I could hear her explaining to her son that I was just having some kind of breakdown, that this would all get sorted out soon. She sounded confident, but there was an edge of panic in her voice that wasn't there before. She still didn't understand what she was dealing with, but she was starting to get a clue that yesterday's victory might have been more expensive than she'd calculated. For the next 3 days, my wife tried different tactics to get me to move the television back downstairs. First came the guilt trips about family togetherness. Then the accusations that I was being controlling and manipulative. When those didn't work, she switched to the silent treatment, which honestly made the house more peaceful. But she wasn't done testing boundaries. Not even close. Thursday evening, I came home to find her in the kitchen, looking unusually cheerful. That should have been my first warning sign. "I invited my parents for Sunday dinner," she announced without looking up from her phone. "They haven't been over in a while, and I thought it would be nice to have a family meal together." I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "You invited them to my house without asking me." "It's my house too," she said quickly. "And they're my parents. I don't need permission to invite my own family for dinner." "Interesting perspective," I said. "What time are they coming?" She seemed surprised that I wasn't objecting. Around 3 o'clock, I'm making pot roast in my kitchen, with groceries bought with whose money? Her jaw tightened. We share expenses, do we? Let me know how much you're planning to contribute to this dinner party, and I'll make sure there's enough in the grocery budget. She turned to face me fully. You're really going to nickel and dime a family dinner? I'm really going to follow the property ownership rules that you established earlier this week. Sunday arrived and I spent the morning in my office getting some work done while she prepared her elaborate meal downstairs. Around 2:30, I came down to get some coffee and found her setting the dining room table with my good china. Nice dishes, I commented. I wanted everything to look special, she said, arranging flowers in the centerpiece. Those are beautiful dishes. I remember buying them. She paused with a wine glass halfway to the table. What's your point? No point. Just admiring my dishes on my dining room table in my house. At exactly 3 o'clock, her parents arrived. I greeted them politely at the door, took their coats and made small talk while she finished in the kitchen. They seemed pleased to see me, asking about work and commenting on how nice the house looked. Dinner started pleasantly enough. The pot roast was actually pretty good, and her father was telling stories about his fishing trips. But I could see my wife getting increasingly tense as the meal progressed without incident. Finally, she decided to bring up the elephant in the room. You know, she said, refilling her mother's wine glass, we've been having some challenges lately with blending our family dynamics. Her mother looked sympathetic. Oh, that's completely normal, honey. All couples go through adjustments. It's more than adjustments, my wife continued, glancing at me. It's about respect and understanding what it means to be a family. Her father put down his fork. Problems with the boy, problems with boundaries, she said pointedly. And unrealistic expectations about children. I continued eating my pot roast, saying nothing. What kind of expectations? Her mother asked. My wife launched into her version of the television incident, painting it as a minor accident that I'd blown completely out of proportion. She described my response as extreme and punitive, explaining how I'd moved the family television to my bedroom like some kind of tyrant. He's treating my son like he's some kind of criminal, she concluded, over an accident that could happen to anyone. Her parents exchanged glances. Her father cleared his throat. Well, son, he said to me, kids will be kids. They break things sometimes. That's just part of having a family. I understand that perspective, I replied calmly, so maybe it's time to move past this and get the family television back where it belongs, he continued. A man provides for his family. He doesn't punish them for being human. My wife looked triumphant. Her mother nodded approvingly. You know, her mother added, a real man protects and provides for his family unconditionally. That's what marriage means. I set down my fork and looked around the table. That's interesting advice. Let me ask you something. Whose name do you think is on the deed to this house? The question caught them off guard. Her father frowned. What kind of question is that? A simple one. This house we're sitting in, eating this meal, having this conversation about family obligations. Whose name is on the legal ownership documents? My wife's face was getting red. That's not relevant. Oh, it's very relevant, I interrupted. Because you've all spent the last 20 minutes explaining to me what a real man does in his own house. So, I'm curious who you think actually owns this house. Her mother looked confused. Well, you're married, so you both. No, I said quietly, not both, just me. I bought this house 2 years before I met your daughter. The deed, the mortgage, the insurance, the taxes, all in my name, paid with my money. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Every month I pay the mortgage on this house. I pay the property taxes. I pay for the utilities, the maintenance, the repairs. Your daughter contributes, occasionally to groceries. Her father's face was getting darker. Now you listen here. No, you listen, I said, my voice still calm but with steel underneath. You came into my house, ate food I paid for, off dishes I bought, and lectured me about what a real man does. So let me tell you what this real man actually does. I stood up from my chair. This real man works 50 hours a week to pay for this house. This real man pays every bill that keeps the lights on and the heat running. This real man bought every piece of furniture you're sitting on and every dish you're eating from. My wife looked like she wanted to disappear under the table. And when expensive property gets destroyed in this house, I continued, this real man expects some accountability, not lectures about unconditional providing. Her father stood up too, his face flushed. You ungrateful. Ungrateful? I laughed. To whom? For what? I'm providing a home for your daughter and her son. I'm feeding them, sheltering them, and asking for basic respect in return, and apparently that makes me the bad guy. A real man doesn't throw his family's mistakes in their faces, her mother said shakily. You're right, I replied. A real man also doesn't let himself be taken advantage of in his own house. Maybe it's time your daughter learned the difference between being provided for and being entitled. I looked directly at my wife. Your parents seem to think I should just accept whatever happens here and keep paying for everything without complaint. Is that your position too? She couldn't meet my eyes. You're embarrassing me in front of my family. I'm stating facts in my own dining room. If those facts are embarrassing, maybe the problem isn't with me. Her father was practically shaking with anger. Maybe it's time you found a place more suited to your attitude, son. I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. You know what? You might be right about that. Maybe it is time to find the right living arrangement for everyone involved. The look of triumph on my wife's face flickered and died as she realized what I just said. What's that supposed to mean? She asked quietly. It means we'll be having a very important conversation very soon about who lives where and whose names are on what documents. I excused myself from the table, leaving them to finish their meal and contemplate exactly who they'd just challenged in whose house. After her parents left that Sunday evening, my wife tried to smooth things over. She apologized for how things got heated and suggested we work together to find a solution that makes everyone happy. Her tone was conciliatory, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She thought the dinner had backfired, and now she needed to do damage control. I listened politely, nodded in the right places, and told her we'd figure something out. She seemed relieved, probably thinking she'd successfully diffused the situation. She had no idea what Monday was going to bring. I took another day off work, telling my boss I had a family emergency that required my immediate attention. Again, not technically a lie. At 8:30 Monday morning, after everyone had left for work and school, I drove to Home Depot. The lock section had everything I needed: new deadbolts, new handle sets, new keys. I'd done enough home improvement projects over the years to handle a simple lock replacement. The front door took 20 minutes, the back door took another 15. The garage door to the house got a new deadbolt as well. 3 locks, 3 sets of keys, none of which would work for anyone who didn't live there legally. Next, I went through the house systematically, gathering up everything that belonged to my wife and her son. I wasn't angry or destructive about it. I folded clothes neatly, packed toiletries carefully, and organized everything into clearly labeled boxes. Her jewelry, her books, her decorative items, her son's clothes, his gaming equipment, his school supplies. Everything got packed with the same methodical precision. The boxes went into the garage, stacked neatly along one wall. I even covered them with a tarp to protect everything from dust. I wasn't trying to damage their belongings. I was simply returning them to their rightful owners. By 2 o'clock, the house looked exactly like it had before they had moved in 3 years ago. Clean, organized, and peaceful. At 3:15, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My stepson's voice came through the front door, muffled but confused. Mom, my key isn't working. I heard him trying different keys, then jiggling the handle. A few seconds later, my wife's voice joined his, sharp with irritation. It's not working either. None of the keys work. My phone started ringing, her number on the display. What did you do to the locks? She demanded without preamble. I changed them, I replied calmly. Why can't I change the locks? I live here. Actually, I can change the locks. It's my house. You can't lock us out of our own home. I walked to the front window and looked out at them standing on the porch. She was holding her phone with one hand and trying her key again with the other, like maybe it would work if she just kept trying. It's not your home, I said. That was made very clear yesterday when your father suggested I find somewhere more suited to my attitude. He didn't mean, you can't seriously be doing this. Your parents spent 1 hour in my dining room explaining that I should provide unconditionally while accepting whatever treatment you decide to dish out. So I decided to take their advice about finding a more suitable living arrangement. For us or for you, that depends entirely on your attitude adjustment. I could see her through the window, pacing back and forth on the porch while her son sat on the steps looking defeated. You can't just lock us out. I'll call the police. Go ahead, I said calmly. When they get here, I'll show them the deed with my name on it, the mortgage statements in my name, and the utility bills in my name. Then they'll explain to you how property ownership actually works. This is illegal. You can't just evict someone without notice. I'm not evicting anyone. You're free to live anywhere you want. You just can't live in my house anymore unless we reach a new understanding about respect and responsibility. Her voice was getting higher, more panicked. Where are we supposed to go? Remember what you told me last week? If I didn't like the arrangements, I should find somewhere more compatible with my expectations. Well, now you get to find somewhere more compatible with yours. What about our stuff? Your belongings are safely packed and stored in the garage. Everything's organized and protected. When you figure out where you're staying, I'll make sure you get everything. This is insane. You can't just throw your family out on the street. I sat down in my recliner and put my feet up. I'm not throwing anyone anywhere. Your father made it very clear yesterday that maybe it was time for me to find a place more suited to my attitude. So, I did. I'm staying right here in my house with my attitude. That's not what he meant. Then maybe you should have been clearer about what authority he thought he had to make suggestions about my living arrangements. The line went quiet for a moment. I could see her through the window, clearly trying to think of a different approach. Look, she said, her voice suddenly softer. Let's just talk about this like adults. Open the door and we can work this out. We tried talking like adults last week. You declared this was your house with your rules. Yesterday your parents backed you up on that position. Today you get to live with the consequences of that position. I was upset about the television. People say things when they're upset. People also live with the consequences of the things they say when they're upset, especially when they double down on those things for a week afterward. I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window I saw her marching toward the street, phone pressed to her ear, calling the police just like she'd threatened. This was about to get very interesting. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers knocked on my door. I opened it calmly, invited them in, and offered them coffee while my wife stood behind them on the porch, looking vindicated. Sir, we got a call about a domestic dispute, the first officer said. Your wife says you changed the locks and won't let her in the house. That's correct, I said. Would you like to see the property documentation? I walked to my office and returned with the deed, mortgage statements, and insurance papers. The officers examined them carefully while my wife watched from the doorway, her confidence starting to waver. Ma'am, the second officer said, your name isn't on any of these documents, but I'm his wife. I've been living here for 3 years. That may be true, but legally speaking, this is his property. He has the right to determine who lives here. Her face went white. You can't be serious. The first officer looked between us. Have there been any threats of violence or physical altercations? None whatsoever, I said. This is purely a property rights issue. He's trying to make us homeless, she protested. Ma'am, he's not making you homeless. He's choosing not to provide you with free housing in his property anymore. Those are 2 very different things legally. The second officer turned to me. Sir, are her belongings still in the house? No. I've packed everything carefully and it's stored safely in the garage. She can collect it whenever she's ready. And you're not preventing her from retrieving her property? Not at all. I'm just not allowing her to live in my house anymore. The officers exchanged glances. The first one spoke up. Look, this is clearly a marital issue, but from a legal standpoint, the homeowner has the right to control access to his property as long as he's not preventing you from getting your belongings and there's no violence or threats involved. This is a civil matter. My wife looked stunned. So you're not going to make him let us in? Ma'am, we can't force someone to provide housing to people who don't have legal rights to the property. You might want to consult with a family law attorney about your options. After the police left, my wife stood in the driveway making phone calls. First to her parents, then to her sister, then to someone who is probably a lawyer. Each conversation got progressively more animated. Around 6 o'clock, her parents arrived, followed by her sister and brother-in-law. They huddled around their cars for about 10 minutes before marching up to my front door like an angry delegation. Her father pounded on the door. Open up. We need to talk. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. What can I do for you? You can stop this ridiculous nonsense right now, he said, his face red with anger. Let my daughter and grandson back in their house. It's not their house, I replied calmly. The police already confirmed that. Don't get smart with me, boy. You married into this family, and that comes with responsibilities. I smiled. Yesterday you told me that maybe I should find a place more suited to my attitude. Well, I found it right here in my house without people who don't respect property ownership. Her sister stepped forward. You're destroying a family over your ego. I'm establishing boundaries that should have been established years ago. Your sister declared this was her house with her rules. I'm simply clarifying whose house it actually is and whose rules actually apply. Her mother was crying now. Where are they supposed to sleep tonight? That's a question you should probably ask your daughter. She's the one who decided to test property ownership laws. My wife finally spoke up, her voice shaking. I'll admit I was wrong about the television situation. I'll apologize. We can work this out. The television was just the symptom, I said. The problem is the complete lack of respect for boundaries, property, and basic courtesy. Yesterday, you had your parents lecture me about what a real man does in my own house. Today, you discovered what this real man actually does. Her brother-in-law, who'd been quiet until now, stepped forward. Look, man, this is extreme. Families have fights. You don't throw people out over arguments. You're right, I said. Families do have fights. But this wasn't a family fight. This was your sister declaring ownership of property that doesn't belong to her, then bringing in reinforcements to lecture me about my obligations in my own house. I looked directly at my wife. You had a choice last week when the television got broken. You could have handled it like a partner who respects the person providing her housing. Instead, you chose to handle it like someone who owns the place. Today, you get to experience the difference between those two positions. So, what happens now? She asked quietly. Now, you decide what kind of relationship you want to have going forward. You can find your own place, and we can work on rebuilding our marriage based on mutual respect. Or you can keep fighting property ownership laws and see how that works out for you. Her father was getting red in the face again. You can't just hold her housing hostage to force her to submit to your demands. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm simply not providing free housing to people who disrespect me in my own home. She's free to make her own housing arrangements just like any other adult. And what about the boy? Her mother asked, through her tears. I looked at my stepson, who'd been standing quietly behind the adults looking embarrassed by the whole situation. What about you? I asked him directly. Do you think destroying someone's expensive property should have consequences? He glanced nervously at his mother, then back at me. I mean, yeah, I should have been more careful. And do you think the person who pays for housing gets to set rules about respecting property? I guess so. My wife shot him a sharp look. Don't answer his questions. Why not? I asked. He's old enough to understand basic concepts like responsibility and respect. Maybe if those concepts had been taught earlier, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I stepped back and prepared to close the door. You all have some decisions to make. When you're ready to discuss mutual respect and appropriate boundaries, you know where to find me. Until then, I'll be enjoying the peace and quiet of my house with my rules. As I closed the door, I could hear her father starting to shout again, but her sister was telling him to calm down. Through the window, I watched them argue among themselves for another 10 minutes before finally getting in their cars and leaving. My wife was the last to go, standing alone in the driveway, staring at the house she'd thought was hers. She pulled out her phone and made one more call, probably arranging somewhere to stay for the night. As her car pulled away, I poured myself a drink and sat down in my living room. The house was quiet, clean, and completely under my control for the first time in 3 years. She'd wanted to establish whose house this was and whose rules applied. Mission accomplished.